Oh, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to me. What am I? Who am I? I'm Bailey. That's all you need to know. I want to talk in detail about things in general. And I find that conversation is the best tool as a means to stop this nonsense that's going on. And if we don't talk and communicate in some way, our body language, our voice, our emotion, we will never solve divisive problems that exist. And it's through apps like Clubhouse that I thought that conversations are always going to win. It doesn't matter what you type on Twitter, on Facebook, or any of the things. Conversation and talking will trump that. But the top thing that will always win, of course, is action. And I've been eternally frustrated that my actions are never reflected in what I say. And I want to try to do better to make what I say a reality without getting into too much confusing shit. Basically, I'm very moderate. In my opinion, I'm very moderate. I think that when you really listen to what people have to say, you understand their sentiments, their values, their emotions, their actions, their history, you would find that we're really not that different. So many people aren't different. It really tends to come down to your culture and your upbringing. And your culture, an American culture is going to be different from a Russian culture, is going to be different from an Iraqi culture, is going to be different from a European culture. But at the end of the day, all of those people can still communicate. They can still share their experiences through what they do and how they talk and how they act. And I really think we benefit from conversation. Because the second we stop talking is when just general society breaks down. So a quick disclaimer, I haven't done this in a long time. I haven't talked and taken time to think my thoughts out fully for a while. I tend to only do that when it's 12 o'clock at night, I have to work in 3 hours. Oh crap, my brain won't shut off. And I thought it would be very valuable to spend time to have nuanced, kind of self-imposed conversations and eventually bring people on to have real nuanced conversations. And it's not easy to really sit down and talk to people who don't want to talk to you, which is what the topic of the beginning of hopefully the series is that I want to talk about Wokeists. I'm calling them Wokeists because, in my opinion, a Wokeist is somebody who is woke but follows kind of the religion of woke. It's kind of meant to be an all-encompassing term, so bear with me here. There will be some terms and some words I will interchange. Give me a minute here. We'll work on this together. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. That's the whole point of talking, is that we can have a conversation, or in this case, I can talk to myself looking at the computer, and maybe there'll be a point made somewhere along here that people will get. And they'll try. And they'll try to do themselves. So, if you like this, steal this fucking idea. Steal it. Take it. I don't care. It's just talking to people. So, I really intend to eventually bring people on at some point. We'll see. I don't know. I get terrified at the idea of actually committing to doing something about the Wokeists. And in terms of talking to them and actually getting them to maybe hear my conversations, I'm not good at it. So if anybody wants to give me tips as well of ways I can try to communicate my message to maybe have people see my side as a good thing, then give me suggestions. But let's start with woke. What is woke? That's the problem. Woke has a definition, but nobody follows the definition. It's an all-encompassing thing. Woke is basically you see injustices that happen in the world and you are actively aware. Some people will say partaking. I say aware. You are aware of them and you know of them, and most people will take wokeism to find ways to help solve injustices. And I've been struggling with these people as of late. And I had a moment here. I was shocked to see this happen. And I'm going to have opinions here. Don't think I don't. But I live in an area where it was finally found out, and I say finally, I don't know if it was ever hidden, but I found out this, where a public school of a place where I used to live is having a superintendent teaching children in the school district. The superintendent was pressuring teachers to basically teach the teachers that are white that they need to teach the students that being white is inherently racist. If you talk to any person on this planet, I don't care how crazy they are, every person to some extent will sit there and go, yeah, that's nonsense. 99.6% is the number I'm going to throw out there. I go to my neighbors and I ask them, do you think white people are inherently racist? They will tell you no. And that is a sentiment that's held across the majority of America. I don't know about other countries, but that's not the point. And it wasn't the fact that it came to my schools where I finally got upset and I thought to myself, I need to do something about this. It was the fact that I tended to only see these actions and these mindsets in places like major cities. You know, your Californias, your New York Cities, your hyper-progressive areas. Now, I don't necessarily hate progressivism. It's just that when it comes to an area where people aren't particularly hyper-progressive, it sends a shockwave that says, not, oh, they're coming to my school or they're coming here. It's more so, okay, where did we lose you? And that's the fundamental here that I wanted to investigate about Wokeists, is where did we lose you? So, like any moderate person, I listened to both sides of the argument. And I wanted to give an example of, like, where we tend to lose each other in the conversation. And this is really the biggest thing that kind of blew my mind to an extent. And it came to climate change. I'm not a climate change expert, I just know the basics. So bear with me here as I take you down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Which is that you are going to find, if you asked 100 people about climate change, a huge majority of them are going to agree that it exists. The fact that basically carbon emissions are skyrocketing as a result of the industrial age, and therefore it's adding more CO2 to the ozone, which is creating a ozone layer, basically. Oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've read up on it, I can't even really remember exactly every detail, but basically we are basically trapping in more emissions into the world, and we can't actually get rid of the emissions as fast. Therefore, the global temperature of the world is increasing as more sunlight hits the planet. That is roughly what everyone's going to agree. I'm going to say wrong things here. Don't be afraid to yell at me in the comment section. I'm not afraid. I'm not offended by it. But basically, you ask somebody that, and they will say yes, yeah, that exists. And even on that end of the spectrum, Republicans will agree to that. Now, you'll find there's plenty of old heads that don't agree with that, and that's, in a weird way, I'm going to say it's fine. It's fine that they don't agree or believe that, because in any conversation, in any debate, in any argument, you need to then convince them otherwise. Why would you exist on a planet where if you just say something, it's meant to be assumed as fact? No, you have to have meaningful data, evidence, conversation, emotion, appeal to make somebody believe what you have to say. And that's step one that I find is a big, what do you call, it's a bridge we just need to gap, which is that being angry at somebody because they don't agree with what you believe as scientific data or facts or evidence doesn't give you the right to basically deny their existence. I don't want to even use the word deny their existence. It doesn't give you the right to basically say you're not allowed to have that opinion. That I guess that's the word I'll go for. You're not allowed to have that opinion. And then on subsequently, the other end of the spectrum, the fact that if you can find data and evidence that suggests onto the contrary of fighting climate change, this tends to be a Republican thing, as they say, well, it doesn't make enough energy, so therefore we shouldn't do it. I very much was kind of astounded, and I have a very good reference here, which was that Joe Rogan had Dan Crenshaw on. And it was a good, interesting conversation, because Dan Crenshaw is very clearly a Republican. For the most part, he's not an idiot, though. He's just kind of a dude. And, he's served in the military. He's done decent things for, I would assume, his constituents. I'm not going to assume. I don't know his life. But it was a really interesting conversation. When Joe Rogan, whom I would say is more on the Democrat side, I'm going to try to avoid labels. I hate labels. But, he's more lefty-leaning, whatever. Don't put labels on it. But he believes in climate change. There we go. That's what I'm going to say. He believes more in climate change. Holy crap. It took us 3 minutes to get to that point. Even in asking Dan Crenshaw these questions, he goes, well, what about wind energy? What about solar energy? What about blank? And you can actually see Dan Crenshaw. I'm gonna fuck up his name. I don't know why. I'm just super nervous talking right now. Maybe because it's hot. And he goes and he says, I'm not opposed to green energy. I just don't see the actual implicit benefits in adopting these new technologies that haven't had proof of functionality. I am, of course, paraphrasing what he said on the show. You should watch it yourself. You're an adult, I hope. If not, why are you watching me? And basically, he has an actual point, which he says that if it cost oil to build the windmills, it costs oil to transport the windmills, it costs oil to establish the windmills, and we put these massive structures up that are going to take 10 to 20 years to eventually pay themselves off. And that's not accounting for things like maintenance, future tech innovations, and, just regular old, what if wind overall decreases? Like, you're not accounting for the future, basically. Then what is the point of investing in that if we don't know if the returns on that are going to be negative? And now you'll listen to somebody like an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who will say something more along the lines of, well, the point is that if we adopt these things, we can innovate them and make them move faster through government subsidies. And then the libertarians scream, ah! Sorry. I gotta throw in a little libertarian jokes every once in a while. But realistically, a libertarian will come in and say something along the lines of, why is the government subsidizing anything in the first place? Funnily enough, that's kind of where I fall on the spectrum sometimes, but that's a different conversation for a different time. Sorry if I'm getting goddamn. I'm not intending on cutting or editing any of this. I really do intend to speak as if I'm just talking to somebody. And I don't know why you would apologize this many times when you're talking to somebody. That's psychosis anyway. But anyway, with this conversation that you can have between a Dan Crenshaw and Alexandria Cortez, who I would say are arguably on different sides of the spectrum, it really does come to a point where you sit there and say, wait. Fuck you, air freshener thing. What happened? Because neither person in that conversation once said that climate change doesn't exist. Neither person necessarily implied that there isn't more carbon being put onto the atmosphere and arguing if that's a good or a bad thing, or the manufacturing plants that do mass pollution, or maybe they don't do mass pollution according to what you think. And that's a conversation that is somehow considered bad. That's the thing that shocks me. I listen to so many people who sit there and say, oh, Republicans blank, and then, oh, Democrats blank. And what you realize is that when you just get rid of the bullshit of your presupposed biases and you find the commonality issue, which is more carbon being emitted into the atmosphere, emitted, I can't speak, then what did we not agree on to that? If we can all sit at the table and say, yes, more carbon is being put into the atmosphere, why aren't we instead discussing, okay, well, I don't like your idea, you don't like my idea, let's compromise. Let's find a better avenue. Let's work forward. And there was actually a really good point that I listened to in kind of one of those things where you listen and you kind of draw your own conclusions from. It was from Thunderfoot, who basically was kind of like, he does a series where basically he kind of goes into like Kickstarters and Indiegogos, and he kind of sits there and from an engineer's perspective, he will look at a product and say, that is not a feasible product. For example, there was this water bottle product. I don't remember what it was called or even really what it did. But basically, it's your average water bottle, maybe 10, 12 ounces. And the idea was that with this particular attachment screwed onto the top, it could draw water from the atmosphere and create safe drinking water. Drinking is the key word there. And as a result, it would only be powered by solar panels. And Thunderfoot does a very smart analysis, and he goes, well, you can't do that. The amount of time it would take for the ambient water to draw into this bottle would be something like akin to 2 months, I think he said. Something. You go watch the video. I might reference it in the description down below. But fundamentally, that's not sitting there and saying that, oh, maybe we can find solutions to the water problem. That's just sitting there and saying, well, this technology doesn't exist. We can't reasonably make that. So if you have somebody like an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and you got a Dan Crenshaw, AOC says, stop everything, make everything green. Dan says, what is the ecological feedback results that we're going to get as a result of doing that? Is it practical? And then you have somebody like a Thunderfoot who comes in and goes, well, this is where technology is at right now. And this is what the maximum capacity really is that we can do. And that's a hell of a lot of nuance that's being left on the table to instead bitch and complain that, oh, Republicans hate green energy and the Democrats want to destroy the economy. When you find out what people really think, what their proposals are, what their actions are, what they want to do, you might come to find out we're not that different. And that's only one thing I wanted to talk about in the start. And I'm going to get here a little bit more opinionated. Bear with me here. But it's this argument about haters and hater culture. There's a particular thing that occurs from ultra wokeists. We're going to call them ultra wokeists. Which is that you can find haters in everything, and it's only because they're jealous that they're hating on me. I don't like that mindset. And I wanted to kind of explain the interesting perspective between trying to be... I say explain, I just want to talk about. I want to talk about why people hate, or people will have haters, we'll say. You've heard this expression probably a million times, and this is coming from me, who I am a troll, if you don't know. I've done several conversations and videos talking about I like to fuck with people. I find it very fun, I find it very enjoyable, and I have a reason I'll explain in a second. But basically, why people hate or think they have trolls attacking them or they have haters. In the weirdest way, you kind of don't. Bear the fuck with me here. What is a hater? A hater is somebody who sees you doing things in your life. This could be a reinterpretation of the definition, but this is what I'm interpreting it as. People who hate on you for living your life. That's like a hater. People can be haters on your success. People can be haters on your misfortune. A hater is just kind of a catch-all term for a person who spends their time to dislike the actions you take in your own life. We'll go with that. Almost kind of fundamentally, anyone can be won over in a conversation. There's almost no people... Again, this is going on like maybe less than a half of a percent of people is what I would say, that can't have their mind changed. For example, I'm not going to sit there and reasonably think some guy in the Middle East whose family was killed by a bomb from the U.S. is ever going to like the United States. Like, there's no reasonable assumption. But do we call that dude a hater? No, we don't. We kind of say, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. And so, when you take out those people who reasonably can't have their mind changed, and then you take out the clinically ill, the clinically mentally ill, you find that almost anybody can have their mind changed. But people don't. They act on emotion. They act on their own rationales. Maybe they act out of preference towards another creator telling them not to, I don't know what the word is, but basically... another creator dogpiling. How about that? We'll go with dogpiling. But if your fundamental argument is correct, I don't want to make an example here. Let's just say whatever you think is actually correct. Reasonably speaking, you can convince people otherwise. It's not an impossible task. I think it's very much bullshit that you can't sit there and be like, why am I being attacked? They're a pedo. Like, that pedo's audience is coming to attack me. Well, you have a bunch of haters who hate on you. But reasonably speaking, if you can go, well, here's my piece of evidence that says person A is a confirmed pedo per the blank court, why are you mad at me? It really does shine that mirror of reflection onto somebody else of going, oh, why do I? So this idea of haters is very, very difficult. And it doesn't really have an end to it. But you'll notice something very key here. The people who talk the most about haters are the people who are trying to profit off of them. I've found over the years that anybody who will constantly emphasize the fact that they're gaining hate for something will utilize it almost always. Not going to say an absolute. I don't like speaking in absolutes. They will utilize it as a means to gain influence or money as a result. If I want people to believe that I'm being attacked, or if I have haters, to gain sympathy with my audience or whomever your audience is, it could be 3 people sitting on the couch. You have to realize that there's 2 things going on. Number one is that what is your motivation? What is the person's motivation who has haters? Is it that they want to convince other people that they are the victim? Or is it that their arguments and the merits to their arguments are lackluster? Or maybe like even the best result or best answer to that is false. Let's just say you falsely accuse somebody of being a P. Well, then clearly you would have a group of people hating on you because very provably clearly what you said is false. It's a lie. And I don't like when people say it's like, oh, these people are dogpiling or hating or they're haters or anything of that nature, because Wokeists love this idea that there is always somebody actively trying to demean their existence. Let's go with that. Wokeists want there to be an enemy. They need their enemy. They need there to be an enemy, because if everyone was gray blobs that existed in the worlds, the only way you could have conflict is if you drew it up yourself. There's actually a great Fairly Odd Parents video episode talking about that, but I'm not going to hash that here. So, Wokeists need a perpetual enemy. And I can't understand something that... Well, no. That went to a different spot of the whole video that I meant to do. But basically, Wokeists need a perpetual enemy. They need somebody to be opposing them, and as a result, it's meant to drive up sympathy and garner audience. And there's a particular individual I'm going to talk about very briefly here. I might do another video talking about him and possibly this lady as well, but I don't think these people live in the same world as average people. And that's fine. I will disclaim that very quickly. Is that the lived experience of me is going to be different from somebody living in Louisiana, is going to be different from somebody living in Canada and Mexico and Guatemala. Everyone's experience is going to be different, so don't go into an implicit bias of saying that because somebody's different, it means it's bad or good or whatever. Just go with, that's what they think, or that's not what they believe. But here's the thing. There is a term called regular. It does exist. Regular exists. For example, it is regular that people are straight. That's regular. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is the normal or the convention. It just means that on a regularity basis, you can find that people tend to be straight. Let's just finish there. That doesn't, again, don't take what I'm saying and mean to imply to something else. I'm just kind of speaking in colloquials. It's kind of interesting, though, when you find that when you've gone into being a wokeist, again, I'm going to keep using that word, wokeist, it's that you have exited regular, not normal. You've exited regular. Regular people don't blank is a sentence that many people on the right will do. Regular people don't have time to think about race issues because they're too busy working. That's a sentence you'll hear. And then you'll think of maybe the other side. Regular people don't think about the atrocities that happen due to the U.S. Army. Well, there's a reason that both of those things kind of combine to mean that a mass group of people are not in your circle. They're not in that world that you occupy. And that's what I'm hoping nuanced, moderate conversations will do, for a lack of better words. Kind of like the summary to the video is basically saying, like, this is just kind of me explaining as if I were talking to as regular a person as I could. Not always. I do have my own biases and I have my own colloquialisms, so if you don't understand, ask. I will talk to you. I will try to respond to the comments. But there was a sentence said in his most recent podcast, which I just started listening to, so bear with me here. I am new. And again, I don't hate him. I swear to God, I don't hate anybody. There's like 3 people on this planet that I actively hate, and that's because they did fucking bad things to me in one way or another. But that's not the point. I don't hate people, and I don't hate on this guy. But he said some stuff in his most recent podcast where he's talking about 6 days in Fallujah, which I thought it was a very good podcast episode. If you want, give it a listen. The podcast has spawned on me, but I want to play this for you, and it's going to be... I have to actually do it. I'm doing everything live. I just want to play this clip, which is... This is meant to illustrate that this is somebody who's exited regular. And that kind of is an implication on Wokeists. But I will play it now for you. Give me a second.
To get blown up. It's a big conversation.
There, let's go back.
It's a reasonable conversation that whole part of the world needed to get blown up. It's a big
This is talking about 6 days in Fallujah, the video game that's coming out where it talks about the U.S. Army being in Fallujah and committing, in the simplest of terms, war crimes. But there is more to that conversation, different opinions. You find it yourself.
Conversation. It is a reasonable conversation to have. It's a conversation that a lot of Americans don't want to have.
Right there. It is a lot of conversations Americans don't want to have. Why? Why don't they want to have that? That's a key there. But keep that in the back of your mind while we go through this whole thing. It's going to be short, by the way. I'm not going to play this whole video. This is at the this is the hour mark in the video in his podcast.
We still haven't wanted to have since 9/11. And still want, it's the reason why people still bitch and moan about, you got to salute the flag, you got to do all this stuff, and, hoorah, and all the patriotism parts, right? But we as a country still haven't come to grips with the impact that our country has put upon not only the Middle East, but all the other parts around the world. And we never really come to that conversation unless it's folks who are kind of really in the space to really take grips with that conversation.
Pausing there again. And that's almost to an extent where I disagree with Ka. Basically, it's in my opinion, people do come to that realization. They do have that determination. If you just ask any average American person, again, this is kind of why polls exist, do you believe that what the United States doing in, maybe not Fallujah, you'd have to be a little bit more broad in the terminology, they understand that the U.S. is not always the best guy. They're not the good guys. And even if you ask somebody who does think that the U.S. is the good guys, well, ask them why. I would argue, and this is my opinion, I'm injecting 100% opinion here, they would say, well, because it's better for me to say that we're the good guy, almost in a sense of denialism, than it is to admit that the entire corporate America structure of presidents, senators, top military brass, and the military industrial complex all collude together to basically exploit as much money out of war as possible. A lot of people will sit there and say, yeah, we're not always the good guy, but even still, when you realize that war is a lot more than just the gunfights, neither side's really that innocent. different conversation. But when you ask the regular person that, I'm going to keep using that word, regular, I disagree. I think they do. And when they don't want to have that conversation, is it they don't want to have that conversation because it's an uncomfortable task or talk to talk about? No. This is the part where I'm like, I want to bridge this gap for a moment here. And there's more to this, by the way. But it's that people don't think they can do anything and they don't want to. So what this guy is saying here, to an extent, I'm not implying, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, I'm going to interpret it in my own way, is that we need to educate people that the U.S. does that to create engaged people to basically petition against the government against these war crimes, which I'm in favor of as well. I think we really need to stop what we're doing in Syria right now. I guess if you're listening to this right now, I bet you didn't know Syria is going through a food problem right now. They have no food. Over 500,000 people are starving to death. I loved that I actually watched Vice. I try to listen to everybody. Vice did a really great piece on this where they said the U.S. is backing a Saudi blockade denying food from entering Syria. And 500,000 people are dying. Did you know the U.S. was doing that? No. But that's the problem, is that you don't know. And what are you going to do? Are you and every person who realizes what the U.S. is doing in terms of war crimes, are we all going to go down to Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, and stop these people? No. And that's, in a sense, a problem, yes. I don't disagree with what he's saying there. But what does a video game have to do with this? So let's finish off his last little bit here so we can go into this a little bit more about being the wokeist part.
Understand its importance, and bless people like Rami and bless people like Imran and bless all the other folks who are poking at this game in that way and talking about those things, because I think, again, that is important, especially for us in the video game space who are trying to elevate this medium in a way that feels smart, that feels more grown up, and feels more weighted in the reality that we actually see. So,
and we're gonna stop there. Again, you should listen to this podcast. It was actually, in my opinion, a very good one. He's had some bad ones. He's had some good ones. He's a guy. People do bad and they do good. Who cares? But what he said right there is what I'm hoping is, in a way, his shock. And to the people who live in the wokeist kind of world, again, wokeist kind of means more of like the religion belief behind it. I might be getting a little off track, but anyway. It's that you occupy a space, and he does further go to clarify, of games media and games production. And basically, Ka has this belief that it is his responsibility to change people's fundamental wants in the video gaming industry to push his opinion that people need to be educated at the fact that the U.S. commits war crimes to some extent. He does go into a lot more nuance and conversation in there. I very much recommend you listen to this. By the way, the video game looks very interesting. I'm actually kind of like, I didn't hear about it, but I'm like, when I listen to that, I'm like, oh, I'm even more interested in trying it. But it's going kind of back to the hater thing. You don't realize that haters can sometimes be normal people. They're not always the most disagreeable cunts that exist on the planet. Haters don't necessarily hate you because they just live to hate you. Maybe they're regular. Maybe they just have different opinions, or maybe they are a different culture, and you're not recognizing the fact that you occupy a space where you believe that people need to occupy the same mindset of space that you do. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. I have struggled with this day in and day out. I want to give you a small story, just a small little antidote to explain what I'm going to just kind of roughly I'm going to give you this antidote and I'm just going to be done with it. Because if I try to go and over-explain it, I will just even confuse my fucking self. I got a huge lucrative contract for the streaming site called Stream.me. That was a thing that one of my buddies hooked me up with that contract. I got a good deal where I got paid to stream on the platform. And now I talked to the top people over on Stream.me. And what I said I'm like, oh, I know a bunch of YouTubers. I bet I could share this contract with them if you were interested, and you could probably bring in more viewers to the website. And I talked about this a bunch of times. I don't think it really matters. I'll talk about it. I got Keemstar on that platform. It was a multi big deal contract that I helped facilitate. That's all I'm going to say. I helped facilitate. I didn't do any. I just was literally put some people in the name together. But fundamentally, here's the problem. Keemstar going over to stream.me creates a vacuum, which is that, simply put, Keemstar's audience will inhabit this new website. But does that mean that's what everyone wants? No, only the followers of Keemstar are going over to stream.me. And this was a big deal with another website. Oh God, I forget what. Vessel. That's the fucking word. And that Vessel tried to make this new platform that would be a competitor to YouTube. It was basically, upload your YouTube videos you're going to upload here 3 days early, and we'll have also some exclusive content. People don't want the fact that there's the Ellen Show as a means to go visit a new website. You have to offer incentives at every level and structure to make people want to do something. And that's something that fundamentally Wokeists don't understand. And even Kai does a really good job of getting there. He gets like 80% of the way there, and he just misses one target, which is that he brings I'm paraphrasing him. I do apologize if I'm misquoting him. But basically he says that there is a responsibility to tell the story of the Iraqi people in 6 Days in Fallujah, that they need to be able to voice their side of what it felt like to be invaded. Now, that's not fundamentally, again, not a problem. That's a really good point. That's an opinion to somebody else. I'm not going to deny their opinion. I'm just going to say, what about the players of the video game? What do they benefit from doing so? And I'm going to throw a humongous fucking wrench in one of his points. This is the only point that I really got angry about, which is that the onus is on each individual to craft their own experience. Let me explain real quick. I play Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. There is a scene in that game where you basically go with a humongous machine gun and gun down innocent civilians. Being a kid, that didn't mean shit to me. It was NPCs in a computer-generated thing. I played it again, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago. I haven't been able to pick up that game since. As an adult, the idea of coming out of that elevator and gunning down, even if it's just NPCs, there's something so different from that perspective as an adult that I was like, I can't do that. I can't, even when I played the level, I was just like, I'm not shooting anybody. Fuck, the AI is not going to even know if I did or didn't. So doubly bonus for me because I don't have to do this. And that's in a massive video game franchise that fucked with me, the adult, but didn't mean shit to me as the kid. Another good example of this, I cannot remember the war movie. You're going to have to scream at me in the comments section if you do remember. It's this one movie, not Platoon, although, or no, not Platoon. I think it was, I can't remember none of these war movies. Platoon or Thin Red Line. In one of these movies that was maybe not one of those, there is an advancement that has to be done. In this movie, they're fighting in Vietnam. Vietnam. We're going to say Vietnam. And there is a top military brass guy ordering a sergeant to send his men to go and attack a hill that has a bunch of bunkers on top of it. And in the movie, in that moment, he goes, "Sir, I'm denying your request." He's like, "You realize you're going to get fucking court-martialed and thrown in jail, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "Sir, I'm not going to send my men to their death." And later on in the movie, there is a conversation had where he sits there and goes, the top military guy, the leader, the admiral, colonel, whatever the fuck rank he is, he sits there and goes, how many people are you willing to sacrifice to make an objective work? And the guy's like, I'm not willing to sacrifice any. He's like, well, this is war. And that moment right there is a movie that is meant to perpetuate American exceptionalism, having a moment of sitting there and going, oh, right, those are people that are going to die up there. How many lives is worth it on our side or their side? And that is me, the independent viewer, experiencing something and meant to draw my own conclusions or exceptions from that. God doesn't do that. And that's the frustration that I have with Wokeists, is that you have to let people get their own conclusions and experience. I can sit down and tell you how horrible solar panels are because they use so much horrible compounds and oil, and they produce so many emissions. At the end of the day, though, we need to reach a better efficiency on solar panels. It doesn't matter unless you're willing to do basically either your own due diligence, believe me, or fight me on my opinion. And they want to do this thing where it's that I almost call it to an extent that they want to deny the thought process. It's very religious. It's the simplest term for it is that God is great, is what people will say. And you sit there and you think to yourself, well, why? And then people will literally go to you and say, don't ask that question or you're going to hell. And that's the moment that a lot of people become atheists. A lot of people. Myself included. Well, even though I'm not atheist, but that's not the point. You don't need to know what the fuck I am. But a lot of people have just this barrier that sits there and says, wait, just asking the question gets me in trouble? And that's something that Wokeists employ in their own strategy when it comes to trying to make their ideas the norm. I will just call it the norm. I don't want to call them regular. I don't want to call them anything. Just the norm. The cultural norm. The societal norm. The norm. It's meant to be an all-encompassing normalization strategy. And what you find is that when you tell people that you're not allowed, I mean, allowed's maybe not a word that they use often. I don't want to put too many words in people's mouths. But I have a very interesting story here, which it kind of astonishes me. And I'm gonna give a pretty good anecdote, and I want to ask you all a question as well. But before I do, I have to preface something really quick. Not a bigot. I don't care. Do whatever you want. You don't know what I am. I don't know what you are. Cool. I don't care. That could be another conversation for a video. Actually, that will be another conversation for another video. It's just not right now. It's going to be many weeks in the future. But the idea that if you think what they don't think, you are a problematic, or you're a detriment. That is fundamentally so damning to what movements and progressive causes can be. I'm not a super progressive. I am a very big progressive in certain ways, but here's the thing. I've found myself never wanting to identify with being a progressive, the same way I found myself never wanting to identify with being a conservative. And these identities, which by the way are the bane of our existence, let's get identity out of our lives. But it's that, why is it that when I ask you a question, you automatically assume that I am a hater, that you assume that I am not a regular, which we'll just say it, and you don't think I know what I'm talking about? Why are those your presuppositions, which are your pre-assumed thoughts of my intent in what I write to you, or maybe even what I say to you? Well, that's the problem. You don't... Oh my gosh. I have too much hair. Sorry. You don't know. You don't know me. I don't know you. So how do we rectify this problem? Well, a woke person will say, I don't want to know you. And I sit there and I think, okay, cool, that's your own prerogative, but eventually you're going to meet somebody you want to know who's going to disagree with you. And the amount of people who can throw people away, that's another conversation, kind of astounds me. And I thought this was a saddening story to me. So I'm gonna start this by asking you a question. I am right on this question, mostly. There's a lot of opinion here. But here's the thing. I'm going to ask you this question, and this is kind of meant to be a test. I'm not going to explain it until afterwards. But here's the question. Can transgender people serve in the military? Can they? Just that is the question I am asking. I'm not putting any context behind anything like that. Can a transgender person, a male to female, female to male, blank to blank, can they go to the military and say, I would like to serve in the military? Answer. If you answered no, you're wrong. again, and this is why I'm saying I'm correct, but it's up to moral interpretation how you interpret this. A transgender person can still serve in the military. They cannot serve under their preferred gender. So we have a fundamental thing here. Okay, that is the truth. It doesn't matter what you believe. This is technically the truth, unless somewhere along the thing I lost my plot, or I went to the wrong website, or I did the wrong research. There is a chance I'm wrong on this. You can feel free to correct me, and if I am wrong on this, I would be astounded, but that's not the point. You can serve in the military. If I am a man right now, and I say that I feel like a woman, I want to live my life as such, I want to become trans, I can still go to the military and say I would like to serve even after years of doing hormone therapy, whatever. The thing is, though, is that I would have to serve under the assumption that I am a male. That is what has to be done in the military because of the ban that put. And then there's also stuff about combat rules and the hormone therapy drugs. I'm not going to get into that, but that's the point. And what we have here is something that is perpetrated as the means to a truth that you want to be the truth. And then I come along and sit there and go, well, what if your truth is wrong? And this explosion happens in people's heads. And I've been attacked so many times online over this, where they sit there and they say, maybe if we shut you up, you won't question it. Maybe if we just overload you with information, you can't question it because you're too busy trying to debunk each individual thing. That shouldn't be how it is. Entirely. Because, again, my point is to sit there and say, well, if somebody disagrees with you, maybe you have to find a better foundation to your argument to convince them otherwise. And that's what I intend to do right now, that's what I intended to do in the story I'm about to tell you. Sorry, I was meant to get to the story. Which was the shirt that I'm wearing. This is a Rooster Teeth shirt. I fucking love this shirt. I liked Rooster Teeth once upon a time. And then a shift happened in the company. I'm not going to explain it. Just basically, it became more like new agey, and that's just not my jam. That's all. So I like the people that work at Rooster Teeth, even if I politically woke or ideology disagree with them. I like the people there. And this was astounding to me. Mario Salcedo, I'll name drop. It's not like they care anymore, whatever. Mario Salcedo put out a tweet when Joe Biden got elected and then confirmed. When he won the election. It was right when he won the election. He won the votes and all that jazz. I'm trying to think of what the thing's called where, this is the day where they say this is who won. Whatever that day was or something like that. And so she tweeted out, oh my God, I can't believe what it's going to be like not living under a tyrant. Take your opinions aside for a moment and realize that that's stupid to some extent because Trump was not a tyrant. I don't know why people think that. You can't prove objectively that Trump was a fascist. You can't use that word. That's fucking like me saying blank is a pedo, but I have no ostensible proof to that. Anyway, and I called her out. I sent a tweet and I was like, where... sorry. No, it was the next tweet that I called her out. Sorry. The next tweet that came out was basically, imagine the rights of LGBTQ people not being trampled anymore and being able to feel something akin to safe in the home. I don't remember, but basically it's the idea that they're no longer under threat anymore. And I'm like, that is insanity. What rights did Trump take away from transgender people? That was my, basically exact tweet. He probably had a couple words in there. And instead of responding to my criticisms, instead of having something to debate me or fight me or defend their ideas more than my ideas, to even, you don't necessarily even have to win the argument, just maybe have a better argument. I don't want to build windmills. Well, I want to build windmills because 30 years from now, they'll make themselves more money or something like that. You don't need to win the argument by factual or morality. You just need to maybe have a better position or stance. Thinking about a pro and con list where you sit there and you go, well, there's 5 pros and 4 cons. So the pros win enough for me to want to do that. You can do that. Shut up. And that was kind of what this was to sit there and say, what rights did Trump do that offended or like basically threatened LGBTQ people? What did that? Because I'll throw a little fact in here. I'm like, Trump was one of the first people to support gay people before presidency. Obama, Hillary Clinton, many other presidents before that, almost none of them supported gay marriage, and Trump was one of the first people to do that. If I'm not mistaken, Trump did a lot of expansions for LGBTQ rights when it came to... wow, man, see, this is what I mean. When you just don't have the information, you just tend not to be able to really get to the point or even really argue your own point. You got to be well-researched. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. You got to remember all these fucking things. Fucking swirl of thoughts in there. Anyway, he did some sort of expansion where basically it opened up that doctors didn't... or no, that was the bad one. That was a bad one I'm going to bring up. But basic something. Oh my god, I'm not going to pretend. So basically, he did the thing where he's like, "Oh yeah, I support these people," and then that was one of his big campaign things where he was like, "I support LGBTQ people." But the only argument that I saw that was a negative, this is a fair point I want to bring up, which is that doctors could refuse to treat LGBTQ people, and I'm like, I have a different opinion about that. I'll give that in a second, but let's get back on the train here a little bit. Basically, yes, this was a bad thing that Trump did objectively. He said that doctors can deny treating these people. That, I would say, is almost exclusively more bad than good. I'll get into that in a second. But the questioning of Mario Saseto's basically wokeist religion, instead of sitting there and thinking that, oh, you know what, I'm going to dunk on this guy, instead of going, maybe I can actually convince this moron that I'm right or something like that, what she did was she took my tweet, quote tweeted it, and said, can somebody else deal with this moron? I don't have the energy for this right now. That was akin to the exact wording of the tweet. I don't really have it on hand anymore. But here's the thing. Here is somebody who works at a company that I'm just like, oh, they're funny. Haha, I like them. They're good entertainer to me. They have their different ideologies. They have different ideals than me, but they're funny. I like them. I don't hate them. And instead of sitting there and thinking that maybe they had an argument or a conversation or facts or evidence somewhere to disprove me, they just went, religion, go get him. And that's the detriment that wokeists will always have, is that they can't sit there and think to themselves, maybe we can slowly win people over through conversation and nuance and discovering truth or something like that. No, they just go, somebody else deal with this so that I don't have to be inconvenienced. And that even kind of coming back to the Ka guy is the point. Even for a wokeist, the idea was that rather than having better conversations, making a better video game, trying to give an incentive as a reason that people would want to hear the stories of Iraqi civilians or soldiers in the 6 Days in Fallujah game, he just says, we need to make other people understand us. And so I'm kind of astounded that basically what happened was that I got hate brigaded like a motherfucker. I don't care about hate brigades. Again, send them my way. I don't care. I like fucking with people. I'm a troll. I'll talk about that sometime else. But I got hate brigaded and told that I was basically an idiot because I didn't know what I was talking about. And the number one thing that everyone kept tweeting and responding to me with was the transgender military ban. And when I would sit there and go, no, you're wrong. You are objectively wrong that a trans person can't serve. The immediate response was two things. The first one is that, well, I don't know about that. Or the second one is to sit there and say, well, they can't serve under their preferred gender. So we have fundamentally lost the plot at that moment. That last moment there is the key that I wanted to take the last little bit here to talk about. Somebody said that you were wrong. And factually wrong. You were factually wrong. That a transgender person can serve in the military. You just morally disagree with me. You think that a transgender person is the transgendered whatever. Oh God, I don't know what the terminology is. You think that the person who, from a man to a woman, is inherently a woman, but I'm trying to tell you, no. That is a moral belief that you hold that most people don't. Factually speaking, you are incorrect. Morally, you might be correct, but that's the problem with morality, is that it's subjected to each person and their lived experiences and their cultures. Kind of coming full circle on this argument. You see where I'm going here, hopefully. I really hope you do, because that's the problem. I had a conversation with somebody, and they, instead of being able to conversate with me, debate me, argue against me, I mean, I don't want to use the word debate. Debate's such a... Debate me, bro, is such a fucking... Instead of doing that, they just said somebody else, whom hopefully is more informed or more skilled at dealing with these people, please deal with them. And when I sat there and I stood my ground to the, I want to say, not to be hyperbolic, 50 people. 50 people who sat there and called me horrible things, called me bigot, defamed me to some extent or another. Not but like 2 people were like, I disagree with you, but I see where your argument is. There were a few people like that. But I'm the bad guy in that scenario. But all I did was just correct the record to some extent. I sat there and said, you are factually incorrect, but that's not the point. And this was the interesting part. The last thing just because I want to bitch about it for the story, this isn't necessarily pertinent to the video. Max Krumke also replied to my tweet. This was infuriating me. This still kind of infuriates me. Max is a gay guy, fucking hilarious. I don't know. He needs to be doing YouTube in my opinion, but he's a fucking hilarious guy who's been on the same podcast as Mariel Salcedo. And after we had been doing I had been doing a bickering fest with other people, he tweeted at me and he goes, boy, why are you following me with your blank ass opinions or whatever like that or something like that. And I had a moment here. And by the way, no hate on Max. He had a conversation with me. Mariel just said, somebody deal with him. Max was like, I'm going to fucking come at you, motherfucker. And I was like, hey, we got different opinions, but cool. I'd rather that than somebody else deal with it. Deal with the peasant, please. But fundamentally, Max didn't understand my arguments. We didn't agree. And this was the interesting part to me. Max didn't understand the difference between taking away somebody's rights and basically like his own lived experience. For example, like during one of the back and forth, I'm like, yeah, LGBTQ people can serve in the military. He's like, well, not under blah blah blah. And then he was like, all these people in the LGBTQ community have to suffer through so many of these injustices. And he gave me a list, and like one of them, for example, was called gay panic defense. Gay panic defense, for those of you who don't know, this is fucking crazy. And I'm like, I'm kind of shocked that this exists, but that's a good point. He brought it up, and now it makes me more informed, and I go look into that. Which is basically that there is a law in some states that is legally acceptable to attack somebody of the same gender if you feel that you were kind of like... I go look up the law. It's like a thing in some places. Basically, if you go to have sex with somebody and they turn out to be a different gender than what you had assumed, attacking them isn't like a felony. And I'm kind of astounded by that. But fundamentally, that didn't answer the question to Mariel Salcedo's tweet that I responded to. Mariel was like, oh my God, Trump taking away rights. And then I come in and say, what rights did he take away? And then Max comes in and goes, here are a list of some of the things that LGBTQ people have to deal with on a daily basis. And I'm sitting there going, great, I learned some things from that tweet. What does this have to do with what rights did Trump take away from you? Does that not have a moment in your brain where you're like, oh, maybe I am just being reactionary, emotional, angry? Anyway, enough of that story, but let's wrap this whole thing up. Let's try to surmise what was a grouping of information and tie it all together. A wokeist is somebody who believes and they see injustice and they want to participate in trying to either correct or just be aware of injustices. And then when you introduce nuance to these people, they tend to really just not be able to dispute as many arguments as they should be able to, is what I will put into like the compression of this. And I want to explain to these people that people don't hate you, or they're not your haters because they don't understand you. It is because your arguments usually are fundamentally, not always, flawed, or you have a world that you live in that is not regular, as I mentioned before. And it is as a result of you not understanding how to take regular people, and I'm going to say the word nicely, but that's just meant to speed this up. Nicely bring them into your world so that you can show them that there are injustices that exist, that there is a fact that gay panic defense is a legally acceptable law in some states. Like, you didn't do a job of trying to correct the injustice. You just went and said, our religion demands this. This is the norm. You are shunned from our religion. And a regular person sits there and goes, okay, good. I didn't want to be in your group. You people are psychopaths and you don't understand nuance. And this is a very long video essay that hopefully says, I really hope somebody listens to this whole thing through. If you did, please write a comment about Kamala Harris. I don't know why. Just Kamala Harris. That's the thing on my Twitter right here. Write something about Kamala Harris. Let me know if you listen to this whole thing. But the fact that we can't have nuanced conversations with these people is absurd. There's people that exist. There's like, if you don't know Tim Pool, he talks about this all the time. He's like, oh, people on the right are always willing to come on my show, but people on the left aren't willing to come to my show because they're afraid of coronavirus. And it's like, okay, well, isn't there a reasonable exception you can make? Why can't you reasonably make an exception to say, okay, there's a prolific person we want to have on because they're for whatever reason. We will make an exception and we will let this one be done through Skype. And Tim does have in my opinion, a very valid response, but that's the problem, is that if Tim Pool sits there and says, you don't meet all of my criteria to come and debate me, bro, then we're not going to have this conversation. And you sit there and you're like, well, I get your point, but I don't agree with it. Why can't we do the same with the people on the inverse? Why can't I reasonably sit there and go to a wokeist, I like using that word a lot, a wokeist, and sit there and say, you don't know how regular people think and act and feel and how they experience the world, so why are you trying to say that what you experience is the regular? Why can't we reasonably come together and sit there and go, hey, we agree, climate change exists. I'm just going to say exist. I'm not going to go into the nuances again. Why can't we reasonably say that climate change exists? Let's create a compromise plan that helps get to the middle somewhere. Why do people hate on you? It's not because they hate. It's because they fundamentally think your arguments are flawed or fallible, or they just don't have merit to some extent, or you're factually wrong, which is usually an extreme case because everything can be open up to interpretation. That's not the point. So, I think we live in a better world. I think we would live in a better world if people would just talk, see body language, understand one another. And if we stop, in my opinion, this dunking mindset. Like, I will take 1,000 Max Krumke's attacking me, calling me horrible things, if it means that Mario Salcedo will sit there and never again go, somebody else deal with my inconvenience, please. Like, I look at these people who are wokeists and I say, you are detached from reality. The ultra progressives, like, I don't think Ka is an ultra progressive, but he is a progressive. I'm like, you live in a different world than regular people, Ka. You live in a different world than regular people, Mario. And the fact that you can't objectively see the fact that most people don't either understand, agree, or know what the fuck you're talking about means that you're detached from reality. And the way, and this is kind of meant to be my invitation to anybody who disagrees or agrees or whatever with me, is that the way we fix this bridge, we mend this divide, is if we just talk to one another. We explain to each other. We go into civil conversation and sit there at the end of the day and say, I disagree with you. I cannot fundamentally disagree with you. But I will not use my existence to fight or deny your existence. And I hate that because it's always related to the Black Lives Matter movement stuff. That's another thing for another time. But like, actually, I'll bring it in here for real quick to wrap it up. I don't hate Black Lives Matter, the movement. I hate Black Lives Matter, the organization. And you find that when you explain and you ask normal people, or normal, I keep using that word, I mean to say regular, because normal implies a standard. But anyway, when you talk to regular people who just live their lives, they work a 9 to 5, they want to consume media and make a family for the most part, regular people, you find that we can go and reasonably have this conversation without sitting there and thinking that I need to make an example of them to use fear to convert them. And subsequently, on the other side of the people, the anti-SJW types, you don't need to sit there and reasonably go, you're not allowed to feel what you feel because here's how you're factually wrong. That doesn't need to be the case. It doesn't. And I like being moderate for that reason. And I hate the label moderate, but it's like, why can't I reasonably sit there and say, I think we should lower the corporate tax rate, but we also need to make sure that Amazon pays their fucking taxes. Like, why does that automatically take your presupposition of my character, my person, whatever I am, and go, oh, you said that corporations should pay less taxes. That clearly means you're blank. But did you not just hear what, like, we can do this. Let's start a conversation meaningfully, hopefully. I hope. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be just talking to nobody as always. But I'm going to invite people on. We'll have conversations. And I hope to keep doing these. And they're going to be as little edited as possible. I don't want to do editing. I just want to talk. So if you want to talk to me, hit me up on Twitter, Pantsas Gamers. I'll probably have it in the description. So come have a conversation. I don't care if you are literally a fucking 15-year-old in high school who has to deal with like a teacher being crazy. I don't care if you're a 70-year-old who's legitimately a racist. I want to talk to people and sit there at the end of the day say, why do you think blank is bad? And sit there and try to find a way to go, maybe we just need to compromise. When we compromise, we might find the correct answer along the way. That's creepy. Maybe not 15-year-old boys. Maybe like, I'll probably keep it at 18. I don't want to deal with that stuff. So maybe only adults I'll have on because kids, weird and gross. Kids are gross. They're sticky. I never understood that. Once went to a park with my not nephew, my cousin, and he he was playing baseball, and for some reason like he was coming up to say hi to me. He just hand touched my arm and just was like, it's like, you're 8. Why are you sticky? It's weird. All right, y'all. Take it easy. If you want to have a conversation, Pantsas Gamers on Twitter. Have a description. Tell me why I'm wrong. Anything. I appreciate it. Ciao.